Hi everyone. I hope you guys are all doing well. Thank you for joining us today. We have James Braha joining us today again. We are going to be discussing Neptune through houses, and he'll be discussing a little bit about Neptune, what this planet represents, and how it plays a role in different houses in our charts. So I welcome you, James Braha.
Okay, so Neptune is considered the higher octave of Venus. It's like a higher vibration of Venus. So Neptune is everything that is mystical. So people that are very devotional and very, open to things beyond the five senses. They love mysticism. They love astrology. They love, all that stuff. At the same time, they're not very practical. Neptunian people are not very practical. So you get a lot of mystics who can't function in the world. They're very Neptunian, and they love life, and they love all the mystical and things from outer space and unidentified UFOs, unidentified flying objects. They're open to psychic. They're open to everything beyond the five senses. But if the rest of their horoscope is not grounded, they will be flaky. They will not be able to make a living very well. People will consider them the black sheep of the family. That's Neptunian people. And many astrologers are going to have Neptune prominent. I have the sun 3 degrees away from Neptune at birth. So I'm Neptunian. I'm more gullible than my brothers. My brothers could never figure out, why is this guy so gullible? Why did he follow a guru? And he thought the guru was God. That's all Neptune. And there's a very famous astrologer probably about 100 or 150 years ago, maybe 100 years ago. CEO Carter was a Western astrologer. And he had a few little books. I don't know. He had some books. And I remember reading one, and it said, if the sun was conjunct Neptune, the person is mystical and spiritual. And he said something I found fascinating. He said, astrologers that have the sun Neptune, for some reason, are more likely to be involved in predictive. Like, a lot of Western astrology is not really predictive. It's more psychological and behavioral. But the sun Neptune types, he said, would be involved in predictions, which is what happened to me. I studied Western astrology, but I said, where's the predictions? Western astrology is very good at making future predictions. Yes, with transits and progressions. I still use Western transits. I use Western progressions in my readings because they give me predictive things of the future. But the natal horoscope, Western astrology, is for the natal chart, the planets and houses and the aspects. It's more about a person's behavior and psychology. Anyway, so Neptune is going to rule things like anesthesia. Neptune's going to rule things like bacteria. So if someone has an illness and you see Neptune is aspecting something, and the doctors are having a hard time to diagnose it because it's hidden. Neptune is hidden. So when Neptune is making some aspect to a sixth house planet or affecting the health, it's usually going to be bacteria or amoebas in the intestines, things that can't be seen. That's Neptune. And also Neptune in the natal chart is very, very, it's fairly easy to know what Neptune's going to do in the houses of the natal chart, which I'll get into. But when it comes to the transits of Neptune, oftentimes the transits may come and go without any big effect, without anything that you can see. I think it's partly because Neptune is very ethereal. It's not like Saturn. Saturn was form and structure. Saturn transits a house, Saturn hits a planet, you feel it. It's as earthy as can be. Mars hits a planet, there may be some acts, you feel it. Neptune, it can come and go in a transit, and you're just kind of open to things that are odd or strange or mystical, but they can come and go without much, not all the time. Sometimes you'll get a good, So Neptune in the first house, whenever I talk about planets and houses, you always have to look at how close the planet is to the ascendant. So first we'll take Neptune in the first house. Neptune in the first house, well, actually, let me do it the other way. I think it's better. Neptune within 3 or 4 degrees or 5 or 6 degrees of the ascendant. Neptune is a planet that is illusion and deception, drugs, alcohol, illusion, deception, weird and strange. It's as close to Ketu as any planet could be. Ketu and Neptune are pretty much the same. Neptune rules film and photography. It rules, spiritual, metaphysical, etc. But Neptune erodes things. It erodes it. And wherever Neptune is in the horoscope, you can't grab it. Like if Neptune's in the 4th house, you try to grab your mother, you can't find her. She's off somewhere crazy, weird, strange. Neptune's in the 6th house. You have health problems. They try to find out what they are. They can't find them because they're hidden. So Neptune is very, very, illusory. So Neptune near the ascendant is going to make the person spiritual, mystical, metaphysical. They're going to be open to everything. And that means conspiracies, nonsense, things that are off the wall. They'll be open to those things because there's no boundaries. Neptune erodes the boundaries. Saturn is all about boundaries. Neptune is all no boundaries. So this is, when it's close to the ascendant, it is very difficult for the person in the world. So in other words, the world is material and physical, and you have to handle it and manipulate it, know how to deal with the world. When you have Neptune near the ascendant, it's very hard to do that because you don't have a sense of the self. The first house is the self, it's me, okay? So this is something that I was talking about. I wrote the book, the Braha Sutras, and I was writing about when Neptune is near the ascendant, it has such a huge effect on the person's life that if you don't use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, you are going to miss some basic things. So I was doing a chart where somebody had Neptune on the ascendant. The rest of the chart was all good, was wonderful, but Neptune on the ascendant, she had no sense of self. She had no sense of self, no confidence. And this is something that if other astrologers don't see that, they're completely lost. They have no idea that the person's, got that problem. So they're mystical, they're spiritual, but they're not grounded, and it harms the confidence. Now, if Neptune is 10, 15, 20 degrees away from the ascendant, it's still in the first house, but it's not as intense. But still, Neptune in the first house is never going to help the confidence. It'll make the person a good mystic, a good astrologer. Neptune is a higher octave of Venus, and so it has a lot to do with music. And you'll see a lot of people with planets in Pisces. Neptune's ruler, Neptune rules Pisces. People with planets in Pisces often want to be singers. And the Neptune in the first house is going to give the person artistic tendencies, singing, and also Neptune is wanting to help people and wanting to heal people. So Neptune in the first house, the person's very generous about helping others, but they have a hard time themselves. On the physical level, when you're looking at health, you're looking at the 6th house and the 1st house. The 1st house plays into longevity. Even if the 8th house is great and Saturn's great, if the 1st house is very weak, it's not going to help longevity because it's the person. Same with health. The 6th house is health, but so is the 1st because it's the person. So Neptune doesn't help that. It helps the person be spiritual, artistic, and generous. That's about it. Neptune in the 2nd house is going to be difficult with money. Money will come and money will go. So again, Neptune is illusion. You try to grab the area, you try to grab the confidence and the self in the first, you can't find the self. You try to grab the money, you can't grab the money. It doesn't mean that you don't make money if you have Neptune in the second. It means you can't hold on to it. It means, this is bizarre, but people that could have millions, if they have Neptune in the second house, they never feel confident that they have enough. They never feel confident that they're not going to lose it. It's illusion. It's illusory. So they have the money, but they can't feel it. They can use it, but they don't feel like they have it. But the most important thing I think about that is that money will come and go oftentimes. It's possible in the case of people that are fraudulent, they might have Neptune in the second house and they might be, make money through fraudulent means. It's also possible, I haven't mentioned this, I said Neptune is drugs and alcohol. Neptune in the first house could make a person alcoholic. They have no boundaries. So they love things that are unbounded, which when you get drunk, you have this feeling of unboundedness. Neptune in the second house might also have to do with alcoholism, because the second house in the Hindu system is food that you eat. So Neptune in the second house, they could be attracted to drugs or alcohol. So it's important that I say this. I use, when I do a Hindu horoscope, when I do a chart reading, I'm using the Hindu and the Western charts. I don't really look so much at Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in the Hindu chart. I tend to look at it in the Western, and then I see where it, sometimes it'll be in a different house because the zodiacs are different. Sidereal and tropical are different. So, but if I see a prominent Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto in the Western, then I start to look, oh yeah, Pluto's right with the sun, Neptune's right on the ascendant. Then I'll start to notice it. So yeah, so the Neptune, so if a person has a transit of Neptune coming into the first house, they're going to spiritual mental or based out. If Neptune transits into the second house, I warn them, do not get into, if people come to you with ideas for how to make money, we're going to get rich really fast, be very careful. It's probably an illusion. Mm-hmm. Neptune goes in the second. They're probably going to be approached with weird ideas that are not going to succeed. Neptune in the third house. Is the sound okay?
Yeah, sounds fine. I had a question. How long?
Yeah, please.
How long the transit of Neptune stays in each house? So
about 14 years.
14 years. Okay.
It's a long transit. Yeah. Uranus is 7 years. Neptune is about 14 years. And Pluto is such a weird planet. Pluto can be anywhere from 15 to 30 years. It's just an odd, and maybe, I'm not sure, it might be 10. It's either 10 or 15 on the short side, 30 on the long side. So Neptune in the third house is not good for brothers and sisters. Now, you might have a spiritual, metaphysical sibling with Neptune in the third. You might have a drug or alcohol sibling with Neptune in the third. Yeah, so I was saying a minute ago that because I don't really study the outer planets in the Hindu system, I know them from the Western. So a lot of what I'm saying here is going to be a little bit more Western, like this. Neptune in the third house in the Western chart, you can bet that the person's mind is a little bit strange or weird. I said that Neptune in the first house makes a person open to everything. That's because they're Neptunian. Neptune in the third house makes their mind open to everything. There's a subtle difference there. Neptune in the first house will not make a person crazy. It makes them open to everything. Neptune in the third house makes them open to everything, but Neptune in the third house can make them crazy. Why? because in the Western system, the third house is the mind.
Mm.
It's a little bit complicated because in the Hindu system, if a person's crazy, it's usually going to be Mercury and the fifth house. But I'm telling you, the third house from the Western side is the mind. And so that Neptune in the third, you have to be open to the possibility that they've got mental problems, lack of stability, illusory, they may hallucinate, that sort of thing. If Neptune transits into the third house, then I warn them, keep an eye on your brothers and sisters. If the person's older, Neptune is like Ketu. It's very cancerous. Ketu or Neptune, I find to be, everybody's different, but I find Neptune and Ketu to be the strongest influences for the illness cancer. Neptune goes into the third house. I warn them, keep an eye on your siblings. If they have any troubles, they should go get, checked out. But it also could mean, Neptune in the third house could also mean that Neptune, transiting that third house could also mean that there's just some problems, some weird things. The siblings don't have to get sick and have cancer, but they could get weird messages and strange communications from the siblings. Neptune in the fourth house, I see it a lot. It's a very difficult placement. It means that you could never get a hold of your mother. No matter how much the mother would be caring or nurturing, you'd never get it. It's like you go to get your mother and you can't find her. You can't find her. And oftentimes it'll be because the mother's a little crazy. The mother could have mental problems. The mother could have emotional stability problems. It's not good for the mother. Neptune in the fourth house, or Ketu, you have to be, I have Ketu in the fourth house. It's very similar to Neptune. And Neptune in the fourth house, you have to watch out for things in the home and cars. So in the home, person with Neptune or Ketu in the fourth, they're likely to have termites. They're likely to have mold. When I bought my first house, the kitchen floor was like wooden tiles. They look like wood, but they're really just tiles. I said, I don't really like that. Let's pull it up. We pulled it up. You know what was there? Mold. A ton of mold was growing. That's Neptune in the fourth. Neptune in the fourth house natally, they're going to have leaking in the homes, leaking oil, gas, termites, mold natally. If a transit comes, this is one of the most, with transits, nothing in astrology works all the time, but with transits, you really never know when they're going to work and when they're not. Right now, I am updating. I have two books that are a little bit older. If you look in the background there and you see those books on the shelf, the yellow one is the transit book written in 90, I think 92 or something like that. And the book way on the other side, which has a red background, that's called How to Be a Great Astrologer. That's the planetary aspects. Those went out of print, but I've got them on ebooks, right?
Yeah.
But now I want to get them on Amazon as hard books, okay? And the transit book, I honestly, that book was a monster book to write, and I'm reading it for the first time in 20 years. And I'm stunned by what I saw. I mean, I think it's really, it's about 25 years since I wrote it. And I'm stunned by it because the transits, I write about all the transits, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto through the houses, and then those planets aspecting other planets. And I'm startled by how most of my work is very experiential. It's based on my experience. You know that. Everybody knows that from my books. But that book, I'm reading it and I'm going, oh my God, what did I do? Because it's very theoretical. It's what happens when the transit works. This is how it works. But so many times the transit comes and goes and you don't feel it. Okay. So so I'm updating those books, and so I want to make that clear about transits, that you never know when they're going to work. When they do work, they're magnificent, but when they don't work, they just fall completely flat. So but what brought this up is that I wanted to say that one of the most accurate things for me is when I'm doing a horoscope and I see that Neptune is about to transit the fourth house. And I warn them, you're about to have leaking of oil, gas, water leaking in the house, or mold or termites around the time, not for 14 years, but when Neptune hits the fourth house cusp, that's when it's going to start. But now that's a Western horoscope for the fourth house cusp. Anyway, so that's what it does. Neptune in the fourth house. The fourth house is not the first, which is you, but it's your heart. It's your heart. From the Western system, it's your heart, and it's what it's what is deep ingrained in, it's what's deep ingrained in the heart. Sorry, I got to say something. In the Western system, the fifth house is the heart and the fourth is the stomach. In the Hindu, the fourth is the heart and the fifth is the stomach. Be that as it may, even with the Western horoscope, so Neptune in that fourth house, it has to do with what you feel in your heart, because the fourth house is the ancestors. It has to do with what your parents and your family gave you. So if Mercury's in the fourth house, yeah, your mother may be mercurial, but it also means you had a mercurial upbringing from your ancestors. You got Mercury energy. If Jupiter's in the fourth house, you're getting spiritual from your ancestors, from your genetics. So Neptune in the fourth house means a very spiritual perspective. It's not the same as Neptune in the first, but it is very, in your soul sort of thing. Cars, it's the same with cars. So you may have, I almost threw out a car once. It wasn't that old, but nobody could find what the problem was. And I took it to this place where they were really spectacular. And, it's per hour. You're paying per hour. And after like 2 days, I said, please just stop. I'm going to throw the car out because the hours are just too many. He said, no, I've got to find what this problem was. And it was a tiny little round, tiny little piece of metal that was cracked. Oh. He eventually found it. But you can't diagnose with Neptune because it's hidden. Neptune is hidden. Neptune in the fourth could be alcoholic mother. I said it could be crazy mother, alcoholic mother. If you're lucky, it's a mystical spiritual mother or a mother who's just a little spaced out. Neptune in the fifth house is not going to help with children. Okay. And children may be a little bit more subject to illusion, deception, drugs, alcohol. The children may have that. But it also could be that you have trouble, having children. There could be weird, strange things that get involved there. It's a very bad placement for an investor. You don't want Neptune there because Neptune is a higher octave of Venus. Remember, it's mysticism, it's devotion, it's inspiration. So when you put that together, when you put that together with investment, it's very bad. As it is when you hear an investment, as soon as you believe in an investment, they say as soon as you buy a stock, you lose 15 points of IQ because you're so committed to it. So Neptune in the fifth house, the person is, oh, this is going to be the greatest investment ever. Not so good. Doesn't help with love affairs either. It's not the fifth house in the Western is not marriage, but it is love affairs, and it has an effect there. And so Neptune in the fifth house is not going to be solid and stable for love affairs and things like that. But I would, I would say mostly it's going to affect children. The person may have some trouble expressing their individual uniqueness. The fifth house has a lot to do with your creativity and your individuality. It's the natural house of Leo, which is Leo people are very individual. Look at me, look at me, look at me. That's Leo. That's the fifth house. Neptune's not going to help that. Neptune in the sixth house, I have that. So you can never figure out what the heck is causing the illnesses. They're hidden. And if you take any kind of drug to fix the problem, it's not going to fix it. Isabel Hickey used to say that, great Western astrology author, Isabel Hickey, she said that the person has misused their physical body in past lifetimes, and now the doctors can't help them. They have to heal themselves through natural means. So I never liked drugs or alcohol, because I would take one or drink some, and the next thing you know, I'd be a wreck. After the euphoric, whatever it is, the body would just go crazy. So I never got into that stuff. But it's very hard to diagnose if you have Neptune in the sixth house. And whenever doctors would give me medicine, I would usually tell them, cut it in half, please, because Neptune in the sixth is going to make a very, very sensitive body. I once had a hernia operation, and the anesthesia, I couldn't get up. Like I was supposed to get up and get out of there. I couldn't get up for just way longer than other people. And then I had heart palpitations for like 3 weeks just from the anesthesia. So I tell them a little bit less drugs. Neptune in the sixth house is not so good for the workplace. Now, you could do a Neptunian career. My career has always been Neptunian. I've taught meditation, did astrology. That's very comfortable. But it doesn't really help with dealing with the boss. It doesn't help with dealing with coworkers, employers, employees. It's not really a good influence. If there's anything good about Neptune in the sixth house, it's that you, for one thing, you'll learn about natural healing methods, because you can't use the others. And, and it might be that you could do a spiritual, mystical career. That's basically as much as I could say about that. If Neptune transits the sixth house, you're going to want to watch out for weird, strange illnesses. If Neptune goes into the sixth house, you're going to have to watch for cancer. If it goes into the sixth house, you're going to have to watch what you eat and put in your body. If Uranus goes into the sixth house, you could have a sudden illness or something, But if Neptune goes in the sixth, I warn people during these years, watch what you eat, because it'll be a slow process. It'll be a slow, degrading process. And the next thing you know, you got problems because you were eating foods that were a little bit old, or they're a little bit, not pure, or they had a little bit too much fermentation, things that are weakening, illusory, they add up like that.
So where is Neptune right now? Like where is it transiting at this? Is it in Pisces?
Okay, so you just exposed James Braha you just exposed James Braha. I'm probably the only astrologer. These days I'm doing 2 charts a day. I mean, I've done thousands of charts. I never keep my eye on where the planets are right now till I'm doing the horoscope. So I do know Uranus is around 15 Taurus right now, or 16 Taurus, Western. Sorry.
Yeah.
So in the Hindu right now, Neptune is 24 Pisces. That means it's about 1 degree Pisces in the sidereal.
Oh, 1 degree Pisces. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Most astrologers know where Pluto, Uranus, but I don't. I just, when I get to the chart, I start looking.
Thank you.
But yeah, Neptune right now is around 1 degree Pisces. So Neptune in the 7th This is a very rough placement. I don't wish Neptune in the 7th house on anybody. Neptune is illusion and deception. But you have to remember, it's inspiration and mysticism. So in relationships, the person idealizes their partner and they don't see them clearly. Neptune in the 7th house, most people get a partner that has all kinds of problems. The person's drugs, the person's illusion, the person has a weird, strange, unstable personality. But the person with Neptune in the 7th, they don't see it because they're, oh, look how great that person is. They don't see it. Everybody else sees it, but the person with Neptune in the 7th. When I see somebody with Neptune in the 7th who is not married, I tell them this. I say, look, when you find somebody that you're attracted to, you ask your friends, you ask your parents, what do you think? Because you'll never see it, because you're just, the eyes glaze over and you see all the good qualities of the person and none of the reality of them. So the person with Neptune in the 7th house usually has a divorce based on illusion, deception. The partner cheated on them. The partner did drugs, alcohol. The partner wasn't what they thought, like that. And the same thing, you try to get a hold of the person and they go through you. You can't find them. There's nothing there. If the person's a mystic and they're a little bit spaced out, not in a terrible way, that would be okay. But most of the time, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they have phenomenal, wonderful tendencies. Neptune is the ability to see things that 98% of the people on the planet simply can't see. All they can see is what they can touch, taste, feel, and smell. They don't see anything else. But Neptunian people, they can see the other realities. But make no mistake, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are natural malefics in a big way bigger than the other planets. Neptune in the 7th, you want to be careful of all partnerships, not just the marriage partner. If Neptune transits into the 7th house, you want to watch out for illusion, deception coming in the 7th house. You want to the partner, you want to watch out for the partner getting weird or strange or having weird illnesses. It doesn't help the partner when Neptune goes in the 7th. Possible. The partner could suddenly begin to see things they hadn't seen before. They could get into devotion and prayer. I haven't mentioned prayer, but look at what is prayer? You never see who you're praying to. So prayer is Neptunian. That is prayer. I always, when I'm talking about Neptune, I always mention Laurence Olivier, who was the greatest stage actor, not film actor. He was in films and he's great in films, but he was the greatest stage actor of the 20th century, or at least one of the top 3. But he's known he was known as the best. He had, I believe, a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. So the Jupiter expands anything it's next to. So Jupiter's next to Neptune. So his inspiration. So when you would watch him, particularly on stage, but he's dead, you won't see him anyway, but you can see him in films. And when you see him in films, there's times when you see just such a subtle inspirational look on his face that nobody else has. That's the Jupiter Neptune. The Neptune in the 8th house. Now, the next 2 Neptunian placements are very hard for me to understand and describe. So some of this is more theoretical rather than practical. Most of what I've told you so far is practical. The 8th house is other people's money. So that's not going to do well if you get divorced and you're supposed to get money from the partner. That's not going to help you. Any kind of money that's supposed to come in from pensions, wills, legacies, insurance companies, pensions, they may have a harder time. Something weird may get in the way. A parent dies, you're supposed to get an inheritance, but the other brothers or sisters take it or whatever. It causes problems like that. But the essence of a Neptune in the 8th house, I think, is mostly spiritual. I think I see it as a fairly good influence spiritually. The 8th house, we know it as the house of death and life energy. We know it as the house of handling other people's money, or money that's supposed to come in without earning it. But really, to me, the essence of the 8th house is Scorpio. It's a Scorpio energy. So the 8th house has to do with our suffering based on attachments. So if a person has planets in the 8th house, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, those personal planets, they're going to go through a certain amount of suffering because of their attachments. If the sun is there, if the moon is there, they suffer on a daily basis. Ow, that hurt. It hurt because they were attached to something. Somebody said something they didn't like. It hurt because they were attached to the subject, or they identify with something and they get attached to it. So if you have planets in the 8th house natally, there's a whole lifetime of going through these death and rebirth, purifying the ego, purifying the attachments. I believe that Neptune in the 8th house is likely to help a person to not have the typical attachments that other people have. So they don't have, Neptune gets rid of the attachments, so they don't have the same kind of suffering. There's the term we use, pressing a button. If I don't care about my looks and you say I'm ugly, it doesn't hurt. But if I care about my looks and you say it's pressing a button, okay? I think that Neptune in the 8th house makes it so there's not so many buttons there. Now, they could have other issues, no doubt. Uranus people are very defensive. They could have issues, but I'm just saying that they may be spared a little bit of the death and rebirth experiences that people go through due to attachments. I think it's a very good placement for astrologers, metaphysics, people that can be psychic, and they can do more of a psychic kind of astrology rather than the hardcore. Like what I do is really practical. I want to know actually what's going on, what's happening. I'm not so concerned with the mystical or the theoretical. Neptune in the 9th house, also, it's one that I don't have real strong feelings for what it does. It's not going to help with gurus and spiritual teachers. Although, this is complicated. Neptune is devotion, idealism. It's where you can't see straight because you're so impressed with inspiration. So you're going to have big inspiration for the guru, but you're likely to get cheated. You're likely to get cheated or deceived or something like that. I don't think it's going to help very much with travel. You could travel, you'd love to travel, but there could be weird, strange problems, stuff like that. I think mostly it has to do with the higher knowledge, whether it's universities. You could have weird, strange stuff with professors or universities or mentors or gurus, things like that. But that's about all I have to say about it. I don't really know that much about Neptune in the 9th. I'd have to find a bunch of people that have it and see what they're like. It doesn't, the reason, when I was thinking about this talk, I said, why don't I know anything about the 8th house and 9th house Neptune? It's because, what's the big problem? Like if Neptune's in the 1st, you got confidence problems. You can't see yourself clearly. If Neptune's in the 4th, you got big mother problems. Neptune in the 9th, what is it? Troubles with a mentor, troubles with a guru? I don't know. I've just never seen it to be anything terribly important. I'm sure it is. It must be important, but what it is, I don't know. in the Western chart, the ninth house is not the father. In the Hindu, it is. Maybe it causes problems with the father if it's in the ninth. I mean, I can tell you that when I do a chart, I use the ninth house and the 10th house of the Hindu chart for the father. And I use Jupiter and Saturn as the main karakas of the father. It's a much harder analysis, but you have to do it because it's both. So maybe it harms the father. Neptune in the 10th house definitely harms the father. The father may be alcoholic, illusion, deception. The father could be weird or strange. The father could be absent. Doesn't help. Neptune in the 10th house is going to give career confusion beyond a doubt. And in many cases, it means a spiritual career. Even though it means a spiritual career, that doesn't mean they don't have confusion. So if Neptune's in the 10th house, then it's, the things that I look for when Neptune's in the 10th is that a lot of times it'll match a horoscope where film and photography are indicated. Neptune is film and photography. But if I see in the Hindu chart, the 3rd house and the 5th house, the two artistic houses are very strong, and Ketu is very strong, which is film and photography, and then I see Neptune in the 10th, then I'm going to think film and photography. If the chart is a chart of a spiritual teacher, a mystic, as a profession, not just a mystic, but a mystic by, someone whose career is indicated to be consciousness raising, Jupiterian, and then I see Neptune in the 10th, then I'm going to start talking about astrology, yoga, meditation, things like that. If Neptune's in the 10th, there could be some experiences of illusion deception where the person is not given what they deserve to get. They deserve to get some success, but they don't get it because of something weird or strange. That's the, that's the Neptune in the 10th house. If Neptune by transit, enters the 10th house, then there is a likelihood of some illusion, deception, weird stuff in the career that you have to be very careful about. So Neptune in the 10th house is not a helpful placement unless you're in film, photography, mysticism, things like that, or the arts in general. Neptune in the 11th house does not help with friends, and it doesn't help with eldest sibling. With friends, they're going to be Neptunian, which could be great. They could be mystical and spiritual and spaced out, but they could also be drugs, alcohol, illusion, deception. They could be all of those things as well. It could be, in some cases, Neptune in the 11th is major goals and desires. The major goals and desires might be more Neptunian. They might be, that the person's desires for a lifetime are that they want to have enlightenment or merging with God. Neptune is all about merging and, like that. But it's not helpful for the eldest sibling. It'll cause some weird stuff. And if Neptune goes into the 11th house by transit, then I say you're about to have spiritual, mystical friends, but you could also have some friends that are weird or strange or having, illnesses. Keep an eye on the friends. Neptune in the 12th house, it's a real hard one to know. I think it's very good for enlightenment. I think it's very good for spiritual. I see the 12th house as being the unconscious mind, and the pursuit of enlightenment. And I think that Neptune there natally, I think is probably a good placement for, the pursuit of enlightenment and things like that. At the same time, you have to wonder what's going on in the subconscious mind. Are there some weird or strange unseen forces that are having an effect on their whole life? Sometimes people have, odd, weird things in their lifetime. Psychologically, behaviorally, there's something that seems to be affecting the person, it might be the Neptune in the 12th. But now the 12th house is the house of Pisces. Neptune is the ruler. So ultimately, I think it's similar to Neptune in the 8th, which gets rid of a lot of the attachments. I think the Neptune in the 12th house is likely to be a real organic feeling for unboundedness. Enlightenment is basically the understanding that you're not the body, the thoughts, and the feelings. Well, if you're not the body, the thoughts, and the feelings, what are you? You are emptiness, nothingness, awareness, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. The emptiness that the world shows up in. The world gets destroyed, it's gone. Then the Brahma breathes in, Brahma breathes out. You have a creation, the creation's gone. You have a creation, the creation's gone. But what's always there is the awareness or consciousness, which allows the creation to show up. And the awareness or the consciousness or the nothingness is with us 24 hours a day. It was never born, it never dies, it just is. That is the one reality. Everything else comes and goes. That's why they call it Maya. And when you are aware that there's four things, you can find a body, you can find thoughts, you can find feelings. There's one other thing that's always there: nothingness, awareness, consciousness. When you realize that's your true nature, you can't pinpoint it, but it's always with you. It's not hot, it's not cold, it's not tall, and yet it's there all the time. The body-mind organism is born into the emptiness or the nothingness, and the body-mind organism dies. The awareness is always with the body. The awareness is always with the body-mind organism and feelings. And when you're aware that awareness is actually you and the other stuff is all like a movie character, that's enlightenment. And so the person that has the Neptune in the 12th house, they're likely, in a certain sense, it's so natural for them that it's not a big deal. Enlightenment is not a big deal. They don't have to go, they may not even care about searching for it, because they're kind of living. The Neptune in the 12th house is going to be as much as you could be living with the awareness that there's this expansiveness that is always with us. They could have that more than other people. Mm-hmm. And if Neptune goes into the 12th house, then by transit, then I would say it's time to search for enlightenment. It's also time to look and see whether there's any complexes, psychological complexes, or things that are in the subconscious that might now be dredged up to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. Like that.
And then when you mentioned aspects, right? So what's the aspect? Like, is it 7th house from where Neptune is? Like, how does the aspect? You mentioned about the aspect, right, in the beginning.
Wait. So when I use the word aspects, I was talking about the Western aspects. Okay. In the Hindu system, we know Saturn aspects the 3rd house from itself, Saturn aspects the 10th house from itself, and 3rd, 7th, and 10th. In the Western system, it's different. Okay. It's when planets are within 10 degrees of each other, they're conjunct. When they are 60 degrees away from each other, like 1st house, 3rd house planet, that's called a sextile, which is a good aspect, but it doesn't really do much. The sextile gives you the opportunity to do something good with the planet. If they're 90 degrees apart, like a planet in the 1st house and the 4th house, or the 7th and the 10th, but they have to be, in the Western system, they have to be within 10 degrees. So if you had a planet, say, in 7 degrees Libra and 15 degrees and 7 degrees Capricorn, or 15 degrees Capricorn, that's 90 degrees or 100 degrees. That's called a square. Those are hard aspects. They're no good. They cause problems. If the planets are opposite, within 10 degrees of each other. 7 Libra and 12 Aries, 180 degrees opposite, within 10 degrees. That's an opposition, which is not a good aspect. And the opposition always occur, the problems in the opposition always occur through another person, because the opposition, they're 7 houses away from each other. So when you have 2 planets that are opposite, it feels like either I get what I want or they get what they want. So it's very hard, the opposition, and the square is hard. The trine is the aspect that, like Jupiter makes, the 5th house and the 9th house. It's 120 degrees from each other. So, if a planet's in Cancer and another planet is in Scorpio, within 10 degrees of each other, they're going to be, it's a trine, and the trines are very good. They make things go easy and smooth. So it's a different system.
Thank you. And I just wanted to ask a little bit about your recent book. Is it Graha Sutras? Is that the recent book that you wrote?
Yeah, the Braha Sutras.
Okay, and what is it like? What is is it transit or transits or?
Oh God, no. Oh God, no. No. This is
Beautiful, yeah.
This is the Braha Sutras.
Okay.
So this is the book I am most proud of. I've written 7. This is the book I'm most proud of because it's the result of a lifetime of astrology. So what happened was, I almost never go to conferences because I do have one coming up in June in Dallas, but I almost never do them. They really have to twist my arm to get me to go. I hadn't been to a conference in 10 years, maybe more, but I wound up going. Some person that was at the conference got into the cab in Sedona and started talking about the astrology conference, and the cab driver was, did astrology, and the cab driver said, "I'm not going to one of those conferences until James Braha goes." I heard that. And I was so upset by it. I said, I don't want to be that person. I'm going to go. So I spent a year, as I was doing my horoscopes, I would keep an eye for things that people didn't know, or things that. So I spent, really, in a sense, I spent a year working on a workshop that was 4 hours long. When I was done with the workshop, I said, I have enough material here for a book. So it's going to be called Vedic Astrology 100 Tips, or 200 tips, little tips, like ideas, issues. So I started to write the book, and I was giving some videos to a friend who had done some proofreading for me. I said, "Well, let me pay you." "No, I don't want money." "Well, let me give you some sessions." So we did the sessions, and after about 3 sessions, I said, "Are you getting anything out of this?" He said, "Oh my God, I have a file filled with all this information. I call it the Braha Sutras." And I started laughing. And then I thought, that's a great name for a book. So the book is 216 sutras, but basically what happened is, it's the title of the lecture at the conference was "What I Wish I Knew 40 Years Ago." That was the title. What I wish somebody had told me 40 years ago. Of course, nobody could, because anyway. So as I was writing, in the lecture, there was like 100 tips. But as I was writing the book, every time I would do a reading, the person would say something that they thought was true. So no, that's not how it works. That would become a sutra. So it covers everything. There's seven different sections. There's the being. What does it take to be an astrologer? There's the doing, which is the biggest section. That's lots of different things that you need to know about how it works. Then there's the predictions, the dashas and transits, dashas, bhuktis, transits. Then there's the upayas, the mantras, yagyas, gemstones, how that works. Then there's a section on the clients, dealing with clients. And then there's a section called odds and ends. And it's basically you know, in the late 1970s, I was studying Western astrology, and I picked up Isabel Hickey's masterpiece that she wrote in, I don't know, 19, probably 75 or 78. And I picked up her book, and I said, oh my God, this is going to be easy. She wrote it when she was 70 or 65 or I said, all I have to do is learn what's in this book. And unfortunately, it's a lifetime of knowledge. So you just have to keep reading it over and over and over. But that's what this book is from the viewpoint of Vedic astrology, and some Western in there as well, because I've used both. So it's 216 sutras, 108 times 2. There's 216 sutras, and it runs the gamut of everything that I think people should know. And part of the reason that I enjoyed calling it the Braha Sutras rather than Vedic astrology tips was that then I realized I could also include 10 or 20 sutras that are not about astrology. They're just about living life after having lived for 70 years. So it is my best book. You can get it on ebook. You can get it on ebook, or you can get it from Amazon. If you can get a hard copy, I would get the hard copy, because it's something that you're going to want to read over and over. Some clients, they said, James, I've read that book 5 times. I just keep reading it because they're all different issues. So it came out, I think, March, April of last year.
Okay. Great. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for joining us today. And I hope everyone enjoyed the session. And if you have any questions, leave a comment below. Thank you.
My pleasure.